John. I'm back for part 2 of my hardcore onion soup. Now this is hardcore because it takes 2 days to make, basically. A day for the stock and then another half a day for the soup. So today we're doing the soup, as I mentioned. Now if you're really hardcore, you can do it all in one day, but I would suggest you split it up. So let's look at the ingredient list. Okay, ingredients are, of course, surprise, Spanish onions, flour, my stock that I made a couple days ago, butter, cheesecloth, bay leaves, kosher salt, pepper, baguette, cheese. The type of cheese does matter a little bit. You can use Gruyere cheese or Emmental cheese is usually the kind you should use. Olive oil, thyme, and some sherry. Are we ready to rock and roll? Let's make this soup. Okay, first things first, what we want to do is just create a little netting of some bay leaves, thyme, and peppercorns. This will go in the soup and help flavor it. The reason you put it in this sort of like cheesecloth is because then we can just pull it out and you don't have to worry about fishing out little pieces of thyme or anything like that. So we need 2 bay leaves. We need a bunch of thyme, which I grabbed out of my garden. And we need about a dozen or so peppercorns. That looks about right. And then very quickly I'm just going to tie this all up. Okay, now we have a little, I don't know what you call it, a little thing of our bay leaves and our thyme and our peppercorns. So put that aside. Use 7 or 8 onions depending on the size of the onion. We need to cut off the top and the bottom. Cut it in half. Next thing we want to do is cut out the core. Okay. So I want to take a look at the onion here. You'll see that there's got the little lines on the up and down on the onion. What we want to do is cut with those lines using our knife. And the reason we do that is because we're basically cutting with the grain. So it helps the onion soften when we start to actually make the soup. If you start cutting this way on it against the grain or sort of willy-nilly chopping it up, it's just not going to be the same thing. Again, it's the details. Okay, so I'm not going to make you watch me cut all these onions. I'm going to have to do that and suffer alone. While I cut up all the onions. If you're like me and tear up a lot as you cut onions, go get a snorkel mask and put it over your eyes, and that should stop you from crying. And it's true, it actually works. You just look really funny. I'm not going to do that. I'll suffer through and cut my onions, and I'll be back. Oh my god. All for the love of French onion soup. Okay, I've got my onions all done. I'm almost stopped crying now. There's my big bowl of onions. You should have about 7 quarts or so if you've got enough onions. So what we need to do is get out our pot and heat it over medium heat. While our pot's heating up, the other thing we need to do is create a diffuser. A diffuser is basically something we're just going to make for underneath the pot. What we don't want to see happen is the pot to get too hot and our onions to burn, because that's not good. So to make a diffuser, basically just get a big long piece of tin foil like this. And all we're going to do is just create basically a ring out of it. Like this. Okay, so once we melt our butter, we'll put that underneath the pot, and again, it'll just keep it off the heat. We just want to elevate it so the bottom isn't constantly sitting right on top of the heat all the time. Basically the heat will diffuse through the tin foil into the pan. It creates a very low, even heat all the time. What we want to do is add in 8 tablespoons of butter, or a stick. Okay, my butter is pretty much melted. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take our diffuser that we made, put this on top of the element, and then just put our pot down on top of it. Now I'm going to add in all of my onions. So I've got our onions in. I'm going to also add a tablespoon of my kosher salt. Try to give a bit of a mix around here, which is tough to do obviously with this many onions. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is turn the heat down to low. Okay, we don't want a high heat on this. Turn down to low. The salt sitting on top of the onions is going to basically start to draw the moisture out of the onions, which is good. So we want the moisture out of the onions as they start to caramelize. This is a slow process, and we want it to be slow because when it's slow, it tastes better than doing it quickly. Because when you do it quickly, it burns. Okay, I've got my onions in the pot. I've turned my heat down to low and put the salt on top of the onions. What's happening, or what will happen, is you can see that already the salt, adding the salt on top starts to draw the moisture out of the onions as it starts to cook. The moisture goes back into the into the pot, and obviously helps with the caramelization of the onions. Good stuff. So what we do now is actually cook this for about 5 hours over low heat on top of our diffuser. So every 15 minutes or so for the next, well, 5 hours, I'm gonna come and give it a stir until they're all really nicely reduced down and brown and caramelized and good stuff. Okay, so what we now have is a cup and a half of caramelized onions. I had a lot more than that, but I've separated out. Again, I only need a cup and a half for this recipe, so you can keep whatever else you have left over and use it on hamburgers or toppings on a steak, in sandwiches. Great. So we have a cup and a half here of the onions. What I want to do now is just put it under medium-high heat. Take a teaspoon and a half of flour and basically sift it into my onions over medium-high heat for about 2 minutes. Flour has been worked in. So now we're down to basically the last little things here. Remember this thing we created a long time ago? It's got our bay leaf, some thyme in it, peppercorns. That goes in. Then our broth that we worked so hard on is going to go in as well. I give that a really good stir. Okay, what we're going to do is let our soup come to a simmer here, again over medium-high heat. And once it does, we're just going to let it simmer for about an hour. What we want to do is reduce the stock down from, it's about 3.5 quarts. If you recall, we want to basically reduce a quart off that. So just do a nice simmer for about an hour, and it should be down about 2.5 quarts. I'm ready to eat now. Soup. Okay, my soup is almost done. Yay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toast a couple pieces of baguette, just brush it a little bit with olive oil, a bit of salt on top, put it in the broiler, toast on one side, turn it over, toast the other side, and then as the soup, when it's done, we can put it in the bowls and basically finish it off with the toasted baguettes and cheese. So the soup's been simmering for about an hour. You can see that, you can see sort of the high line here. It's certainly the stock is reduced quite a bit, hopefully to about 2.5 quarts or so. What I want to do is give it a taste, of course. Holy shit, that's good. Okay, I'm going to add a couple drops of the sherry, which I think I mentioned before, earlier, at the very beginning. Okay, I've added my sherry, bit of pepper, another taste. Brilliant. Okay, that is done. Also nicely toasted up and ready to go. Okay, usually for French onion soup I use a little soup bowl like this. These are great. You can get these at the kitchen store for not very much money. Traditionally, to what you serve the French onion soup in. I'm going to use a bigger bowl because it's just Tara and I, so we're going to be greedy and eat a bit more. The recipe, if I haven't said already, makes enough for about 6 people. You can double it, of course, because we have lots of onions left over. But for this one, it's enough for 6 people, so I'm just going to basically put it together and then put it in the broiler, and then we're going to eat, finally. So I got my baguette. I'm going to layer that cheese, the Emmental cheese, over top, or Emmental, depending on how you say it. I don't know how to say it, so I just say it. Basically, what we want to do is let the cheese sort of form a nice sort of crust over the top. So I've cut it into thick slices, and I've also shredded it as well. Okay, a couple minutes under the broiler, and we're ready to eat. Okay, that's it. We're done. Cheese is nicely melted, slightly browned. Soup is going to be very, very, very hot. So that's my uber hardcore French onion soup. Now you know why it's hardcore, because it takes a little bit of time, a little bit of patience, but it's going to be worth it. Enjoy.